yourselves to each other, but we're going to leave you with 42 minutes. If you could just introduce yourself for 42 minutes, then Alex and I will cover the rest of it.
Nice.
Rob needs no introduction here. Who are we kidding? All right, everybody, I hope you had a nice lunch. I hope you're feeling good and not too tired. This is going to be an energetic one, I promise. My very favorite, Rob Martin from the FinOps Foundation, is here with Alex Hullah from Goldman Sachs, he's representing as a FinOps Focus maintainer for us today, not necessarily from Goldman, but through your involvement in the Focus project. So give it up for them, give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you, buddy.
And hear about the 1.1 GA.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Rob, how do you want to start this off? Should we do a little survey, or should we? Because I want to know.
We should do a little survey.
Yeah.
How many of you have used focus data in your FinOps practice so far? In production.
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, that's a good question. Okay.
Is this production or sandbox here?
So 5 or 6. How many people have downloaded your focus data from your cloud provider of choice? Excellent. And how many of you are Focus Analyst certified? Even better, all of you received a code, so there's no excuse. By the end of this session, please get FinOps Focus certified.
I now feel guilty because I'm not analyst certified.
Well,
and I'm maintaining the thing. Whoops.
You're qualified to do that. Thank you. We wanted to level set on this because we're in Focus land here at the FinOps X conference. Right across the hallway from this room is the Focus Lab. So I recognize many of you who have already visited the Focus Lab. Who's not visited the Focus Lab yet today? Okay, please take some time out of your schedule, either during a break, during a lunch, after hours, during the party, in the middle of the night. Come by the Focus Lab, and in the middle of the night, you'll be able to even steal stuff. So that is even better.
And this is actually, I know it might be a bit silly, but this is actually really important for us because as we are starting to define the future versions of specification, your feedback is the most important thing we can gather. What have we missed? What have we not understood? And we're going to explore a little bit more of that today, but let's get into why we're doing Focus in the first place. We've already had Udam and JR talking about our main stage, but to remind
you got to introduce yourself, dude.
Oh, do you want me to actually introduce myself?
Yeah.
I thought we've already done. Oh, right. Hi, I'm Alex Hullah. I'm a Focus maintainer, practitioner at Goldman Sachs, and previously have made the transition from being a FinOps tooling provider to now being on the client side of the space. So depending on which side of the coin you want the stories from, I can give you a little bit of both. So more than happy to talk about that. But the reason I'm so excited about Focus is it gives us an opportunity to redefine how we interact with our cloud service providers. Because the idea is that Focus is for everyone. Whether I am a producer of billing data, and this can be obviously our traditional CSPs, etc., or it can be our SaaS providers, or it could be other things that we haven't thought about yet, our infrastructure providers, other services that may not have even kind of been conceived in the initial scope. We want to make this a broad and open billing taxonomy available to everyone that makes it consistent for everyone who consumes public cloud billing data. We all live with that, and we've all found our own workarounds for the machinations of how we deal with public cloud billing data, and Focus gives us an opportunity to kind of redefine that, because we're effectively covering the whole ecosystem of touchpoints. And I appreciate we have cloud vendor as our key generators here, but when I look at this, I don't think of it purely as the cloud vendors. I think of this as SaaS providers. I think of this potentially as private cloud providers. I think of this as, in theory, I would hope, on-premise inventory systems and billing data and data from those that we actually want to modernize to make it look like and behave like public cloud does, because we all appreciate, we like the flexibility, the elasticity that comes from public cloud. So why would we want to limit this data set to just those cloud vendors? So I think over time you might see this change, but primarily at the moment, especially as we can get native data from our big 4 CSPs in Focus version 1 format, we think of our cloud providers as our generators.
Yeah, a couple of important call-outs to bring up here. One is the FinOps vendors in the middle there. You're seeing those organizations both ingesting data on your behalf, looking at your cloud data and giving you access to that stuff. So there's a dual role that they've got because they're probably not the end point of where your data goes, right? Your cloud data, your SaaS data, your other billing data is going to come in, it's going to be processed, you're going to report using some of those tools, and then you're going to probably pass some of that data down to other systems, to data lakes, to reporting systems downstream from you or into your accounting system. And so those FinOps platform vendors are also going to be important producers of focused data. And that's something, if you're using one of those platforms, we'd love for you to talk to your vendors about. You again, are the practitioners, are the key to driving this forward and to getting adoption of focus across the industry right now.
It does feel like actually we're going to see a lot more kind of enrichment providers in the middle here, adding extra information and adding extra detail that we need to solve our particular use cases. But ultimately, the end benefit that we're trying to drive is for the consumer. We've all spent a long time staring at various proprietary billing formats, and so this is designed to simplify our way to consume our billing data regardless of where it is actually coming from. And I kind of feel like we end up with a little bit of a, this looks really simple. This should be really straightforward, but kind of why isn't it? So if we wind back the clock a little bit, let's think about why we got to the place, why we need focus in the first place. So we started out, early days, we're moving to public cloud. Maybe I've got one or two applications. I've picked one of our CSPs to provide a couple of servers, some storage, some basic bits and pieces to us. And I'm going to get my invoice. And I look at that, and that's fine, because that's what I would kind of get if I was buying something from a traditional third party, or or what I might get from on-premise. So it's not really that significant, and it's not really that much money, so it doesn't really matter. But we quite like the speed and the agility and the fact I can click the button and provision something and deploy something, so we use cloud more. And all of a sudden, that invoice isn't really enough. So we ask our cloud service provider that we've picked, okay, can you tell me a little bit more? So we get the invention of the detailed billing record formats, whether that's the CUR or the BigQuery log, or whatever your provider's choice is. And they say, okay, yeah, we'll give you a little bit more of a breakdown. Well, tell me a bit more. And then we say, okay, right, that's good. I can explain a bit more. Can you give me a bit more detail? Because I now want to optimize this service or understand how I can change it. And again, our CSPs, being customer-driven and customer-led companies, they're like, yes, of course, we'll give you some more information. We will add that extra detail in. And over time, we're starting to build up a lot of extra detail and a lot of extra information in these billing files. And then, all of a sudden, we then decide, actually, we quite like this cloud, but there's this really cool service over here that's from this other cloud service provider. I want to use that. So let's go do it. But we then all of a sudden pick up a whole different billing model, a whole different language, because all of the things that we've learned and understood that we've become specialized in with our first cloud provider don't necessarily apply with our second cloud provider. So we're back at square one, and we have to learn all over again. And it's not really surprising that effectively, because we've been asking for more detail with our own specific CSP that we started with, these billing models and these formats and this detail has evolved to give us kind of what we want, but it's all evolved in silos. Each individual provider has decided, I will solve this problem this way. So then when we try and bring this information together, it's actually wildly different. It's kind of a little bit impossible in some respects, and we want to try and resolve that. And it means that either I, as the FinOps practitioner, have to go learn a whole new language whenever we bring on a new CSP, or I need to go find somebody that actually understands that language, and not just how to read the bill, but how they calculate commitment discounts and particular benefits, and how that gets represented in their personal language. And so it does feel like we're kind of pressing the reset button every time. And so the idea is that as practitioners, unfortunately, because we ask for more detail and we ask for more information, we've kind of created this problem, okay? We wanted it, and now we've got it, and it's actually kind of hard. And so the point of what we're trying to do here is use the community that we have to kind of press reset on this. Let's stop the madness. Let's reimagine. Now we know what the world looks like today, where we're all in kind of multi-cloud and multi-SaaS environments. What is it that we want? How can we better address this? And Focus is designed to be the first practitioner-led standard to allow us to try and solve the problem that we in part created, okay, guys? So we want to get away from the idea of spending time building our own Rosetta Stone, shifting data from place A to place B, translating it, et cetera, and more time on those valuable FinOps use cases. So the goal for what we're trying to do is, regardless of the data source, in theory, we're primarily cloud providers, SaaS providers, internal costs, internal billing mechanisms, by providing a standard language for us to describe how that data should look, how it, what are the kind of metering mechanisms it should be charged in, how should it handle various discounting mechanisms in a way that isn't going to break somebody else or a different provider or a different internal service. We are being able to better enable not only just us as practitioners, but also third-party service providers and third-party tooling providers to understand the environment we're in. And the key thing I think that we sometimes don't talk about Focus enough is everything that we put into the Focus spec is driven around FinOps practitioner-based use cases. So how do I provide chargeback and showback? How do I understand my commitment coverage rates? How do I understand my commitment utilization rates? And actually, Rob, that's one of the things I think is great about the Focus Lab, is we've got a great opportunity for you to deep dive into what is in that use case library so far. And I would really encourage you to tell us if there is a use case you think we haven't talked about yet or is missing that's important to you. Tell us. We want it on the list. We want to understand what it is that we're missing. And so, from my point of view, as the practitioner side, I look at this as the main benefit for me is I don't have to do data translation anymore. I get to pick up a native data set provided by my CSP or my SaaS provider, and I know it will normalize consistently into my data lake, and I can start using it immediately for decision making. I think the big win with that is also when it comes to finding new folks to join you on your FinOps journey. When you need a new FinOps practitioner or a new team member, when I've been hiring in the past, you're normally looking for, right, I need somebody that understands the Azure billing model, or I need somebody that understands the OCI billing model, because that's, in order to help them understand. Or if I'm hiring somebody for that, into the team and they don't have that knowledge, I know I'm going to have to train them, and it extends the ramp-up time. This is one of those problems that Focus eliminates because we actually have a common standard and a common definition, and also the SQL libraries that you're going to talk about, SQL query libraries you're going to talk about later, that allow us to address common challenges and common FinOps use cases. And the one thing that I'm really hopeful for down the road, when we look at actually being able to bring together not just new external providers that we might be using, say, oh, I want to use this SaaS provider or this new infrastructure provider, but actually for the third-party FinOps services providers. Because for the longest time, I feel like every time I want to pick a piece of FinOps tooling, I have to check, does it support my CSP A, B, and C, and SaaS provider X? And if it doesn't, then I can't use it. Even if actually it's got the best right-sizing engine going, or it's got the best forecasting approach, or it's got the best governance tooling, etc. Without that, I would hope, and what we aim to do with Focus is to decouple the idea that, okay, I need to support every single service and every single provider under the sun, and actually allow me to say, right, you support Focus? Great, I know you can take my data. Now I can actually make my tooling decisions based on what are the value-added features that your tool set is bringing to me, and not based on that kind of data structure piece.
Yeah. And this isn't a benefit just for practitioners. It's also a benefit for, I think, cloud providers as well. The cloud providers, let me just take a second and give some love to the cloud providers. Focus is one of the few places in the world that I've ever seen multiple cloud providers get up on stage together and say, we are doing something together on behalf of the whole community of FinOps practitioners. This is nothing, this is a very big deal. And for the cloud providers who are involved in this project, Alex is a maintainer of this project. Maintainers typically put in 6 to 8 hours a week of work, volunteer work, in addition to their regular jobs. I'm assuming you have a regular job? that you do.
Occasionally, yeah.
And it is no small amount of commitment, and this is coming from companies like Goldman Sachs, like Capital One, like Datadog, and the FinOps Foundation as well, and all of the cloud providers in addition to that. So if you're enjoying, if you're getting something out of the Focus project, please also give some love to the maintainers, to the steering committee, and to the cloud providers who are really supporting this, because it makes a big difference. Why are they doing this? You might be asking, like, why would we standardize something and make things easier? Well, aside from just the general, I think, shared value that all the cloud providers have of making people happy with their cloud services, of trying to be helpful to their customers and have that sort of customer engagement and customer excitement, they are also able to focus their efforts on other things besides just the billing data, right? If there is a consistent way that they can create that data, that gives them a head start. It gives them a structure in which to each of the service teams, whether 2 pizza box or gigantic cross-organizational service teams, they can output that data in a consistent format. And over time, we hope to see that happening across more and more of their services. It also accelerates usage, as Alex said before. If you've got the opportunity to use a service in another cloud because it's awesome and it's not your primary cloud, you may be able to do that in a much more easily managed way going forward. So lots of good reasons for the clouds to get involved in this, and breaking down those silos between the clouds is a very FinOps thing that Focus is doing, sort of breaking down the silos.
I actually want to ask, Rob, as you're talking about this, do we actually have any folks that are just one single kind of CSP in the room?
Anybody just using one cloud?
Just one.
Yeah, a few.
I promise you, dude, this pain is coming when you pick up the second one. I do apologize. Apologies.
There are even benefits. I mean, I'll take a detour for a moment. There are even benefits, I think, in using, even if you're just using one provider, to getting the Focus data in that consistent format.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of those later. Terminology, the consistency of terminology. More and more what you're going to see in the FinOps website are going to be KPIs and use cases and playbooks that reference the data that we're dealing with in Focus format, because the Focus terminology is going to be much more highly defined. It's going to be much more precisely defined. And so when I see a thing like effective cost, I know exactly what that includes. I know how that goes.
Do you know what? That will be nice when we get to come here and I don't have to sanity check. What are you calling effective cost? And
That's
what am
right.
I calling effective cost?
Well, as a guy who used to do training all the time, it's always fun to talk about, if you're using tags or labels or other metadata, and we can just say tags. You know why? Because tags has been the term that we have picked up to represent all those things. And if I say account, if I say billing account, I can just say billing account instead of enrollment or management account, et cetera. So,
or project or whatever whatever we want to be.
So I think the benefits for cloud providers are huge. There's also benefits for the FinOps service vendors who are involved in this as well. Many of you, how many use a FinOps platform or tool to help you manage your stuff? About half people in the room. Okay, so if you're using a platform or tool, they may be doing your data ingestion for you. They're doing that on your behalf, right? And they're managing that difficult job. And they may have been doing that for many years and do a good job of it. But as you are starting to include, as JR talked about this morning, more and more scopes in your FinOps practice, as you're starting to take on managing the SaaS bills, managing your Databricks usage, managing your SAP bill. We were talking with SAP just out in the hallway. They're here, talk to them. Then look at that information and look at how you can combine that data together and start to make those cost-aware product decisions, or those FinOps-aware FinOps-aware product decisions. All the words come together. I've had 12 cups of coffee today, so I apologize.
Don't worry, focus on focus is still messing me up as well, man.
The FinOps-aware cost decisions that you want to make are going to be easier if you've got more of that data in a more consistent format, and you can pull that together. Yeah. So it's easier for the vendors to add integrations. We hope it'll be easier for them to focus their efforts, their cycles on improving new services, new recommendation engines, new insights that they can give to you, instead of spending so much time working on the ingestion challenge.
Just bringing the data in and normalizing it, which is just, it's not where we are now on the value journey. Exactly. We need to be looking at newer things. Okay. So, all right, Rob, I should give you this for the next bit, because you're going to talk us through the column library and the details. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the stuff that we're providing, and you'll be able to get a preview of all of this stuff over in the lab. But what Focus has generated, or we've put on the focus.finops.org website, and you can see the link up there. Go to that afterwards, please, is the column library. This is a place where you can start to see all of the different columns that are a part of the standardized Focus data set. These columns are described. You can download also the entire list of things that gives you also the normative data, which things are required, which things can be nulls, et cetera, those kinds of details. You can also see the columns for version 1.1, which was released this morning, so that information is now on the website as well. In addition, you'll be able to see, as Alex alluded to earlier, the SQL query library, which is new, which has been around for a bit. But this talks about the specific types of use cases. I want to be able to report refunds by sub-account within a billing period. That's a standard thing that many FinOps organizations are going to do. And what the SQL query library will give you is an example query statement, example SQL statement, where you can pull that data out of the focus data set. That's going to give you experience both learning some of that terminology, which I can't read because I'm wearing my reading glasses instead of my screen-looking glasses. But I can see that data, and I can then grab that query if I would like to, pull that into my own data set, and start to look at that. It's really difficult to share FinOps data, right? How many of your companies would like you to publish your FinOps data on our website? I didn't think so. So we have actually introduced a new thing that is now in preview. You can take a look at it over in the lab, and it should be live on our website in a week or so. This is the Focus Query Sandbox. Very similar to the SQL query library because it's going to give you an example of a SQL query you could use for a particular use case. There are 15 or 20 use cases in there right now. And you'll be able to see down at the bottom some sample data. This is Linux Foundation data. The FinOps Foundation is part of the Linux Foundation. And so we have taken their data, sanitized it, and we haven't told them we're using it on our website. So if you could please keep that to yourselves, I would really appreciate it. This is some real data from 3 different cloud providers that we have available to us. It's not a huge set of data. It's not a billion-line billing set, but it's going to be an example. You can take a look at the kinds of things that are showing up in the columns that you see there, and you can browse. There's a little button on the one over in the lab where you can browse the data set. And so you get a sense if you're the type of person who needs to look through a query or a spreadsheet to get a grounding on what kind of data is going to be in there. That's the kind of thing that you can do over there in that lab.
I mean, Rob, if you step back a sec, I think the SQL library is actually the unsung hero here that we don't make a big enough deal about. Because obviously the specification has to be published in a certain way to allow for easy adoption for a variety of different providers. But this library is actually the easy button. Because if I want to understand what is my commitment coverage, I know that there is a standardized way where I can grab that query and I'm doing it in a consistent way that is consistent across other practitioners and other organizations as well. If I need to understand utilization rates, regardless of the use case, when we have these standardized queries, it goes hand in hand with the spec. We know that the queries can be written because the spec will support them, and it gives us a consistent way of measuring regardless. And it's turnkey, which I think is super helpful, and I don't think it gets made a big enough deal out of compared to the spec. Which
Until
is built
now.
On, yeah, well,
Until now.
I like this. This is where I like to send people to go say, hey, this is how you do it.
Yeah, there are a bunch of use cases out there. They're the kind of common use cases that we see from FinOps practitioners. But if you go to the SQL query library and you find one that is not there for something that you do, it's really important for me to be able to calculate effective savings rate on my Azure account in a certain way. Talk to us about those. That's a great place to go to the support tab there and send us a message, or go to our GitHub site and put in messages to give that information to the Focus project. The project members work really hard, and they use all of the feedback that we provide as a community. And so the more of us that are participating in that process, the better it is for the project, and the better it is for the outcomes overall.
Yeah, JR wasn't joking. It's 5 calls a week, and it is. Anyway, that's not the reason why I'm here to grumble about it. Hopefully, the whole point is to actually give you guys some insight into what we have been working on. So let's look at some highlights of what's coming 1.1. As Udam touched on earlier, we've added some specific additional columns to address new use cases. We've got a much more robust metadata process that's designed to help us allow folks who are building their own ETL and ingestion mechanisms to manage version changes going forward over time in a much more consistent and effective way without breaking any historic data and without us needing the dreaded historic reprocess. The goal here is that the Focus dataset can be your authoritative system of record and also allow it to change and enhance over time without you needing to necessarily keep all of the original billing records from the many different service providers for you to have to manually do that reprocessing and retranslation. And also, as we're getting into 1.1, we realized some of the ways we defined certain columns in version 1.0 were a little bit too generous. So we're trying to make sure that we have a consistent behavior for a given cost column or a given service column, so that when you're comparing and joining the data from those CSPs, you're getting kind of like-for-like comparables. We realized we were a little bit too soft in 1.0, so we're doing a number of normative updates to tighten up those constraints to make sure we get consistent behavior across those different CSPs. So let's have a look. What did we have? We have our new columns this morning. We've obviously made enhancements to SKU, enhancement to commitment discount, enhancements to our resource information, and enhancements to our service categorization. And so let's look at these in more detail. So now, by popular demand from the community, we have support for capacity reservations. So I appreciate these are kind of a little bit more of a niche thing, but capacity reservations are where you are purchasing a guaranteed availability to spin up a given resource in a given availability zone. We typically only use them for really mission-critical workloads because they can be kind of expensive, but also that also means they're kind of ripe for being underutilized. So the reason we've added these two key columns here, first of all, is our capacity reservation ID, so you can tie back and identify exactly which capacity reservation is being is supporting a given asset, but also the capacity reservation status. Critically, is it used or is it not used? Because we know that these are ripe for effectively idle resource, kind of an over-provisioning. So it's meant to give an easy way for you to identify where, for those of you who need capacity reservations, do I have the right number? Do I have enough excess capacity? And do I want to kind of trim or fine-tune that? Our second element is around commitment discount usage. So we're trying to make assessing our commitment rates and our commitment utilization as easy as possible. And so two of the key elements that were added as new columns in this were our commitment discount quantity, so the volume of a given commitment that I may have purchased, but also critically the commitment discount units, because providers have different commitment mechanisms. It may be in units of resource, or dollars of spend, or hours. It varies, and as we expand into other providers, I expect we're going to see all sorts of other additional commitment discount mechanisms. So this is kind of designed to give that starting point as a placeholder for us to be able to capture the known commitment discount mechanisms today, make it easy for you to calculate commitment purchases and amortization across those eligible resources. And we expect that we're going to continue to expand on this as we go into the future. Our third element, which you would not believe actually how hard this was to actually get agreed, is taking the next step down on the service classification. Now, I tend to look at this as something I need to use when I'm trying to either explain to folks that are in the wider organization that are not familiar with the parlance and the terminology of the public cloud. So they're not familiar with the details of what is an EC2 or what is an AMI or whatever the vendor-specific language is. Here is where we're trying to understand. It's a server. Oh, it's a virtual server, or it's a bare metal server, or we're extending that kind of high-level taxonomy that makes it easy to compare not only kind of aggregates across our cloud estate, but also using language that makes it comparable to potentially our on-premise estate as well. So we're trying to give that kind of common language to make sure that we are. I effectively think of it as when we're kind of doing the C-level reporting. What is the family of service we're using? And in the past, Rob, I've had to make these on my own and kind of had to guess. It's actually quite nice that we have a standard here that when I'm talking to you guys in the room of what is object storage versus block storage versus long archive storage, we know we're talking about the same thing, and I don't necessarily have to be referencing the individual product names.
In my experience, the CIO typically asks the question, how much are we spending on compute? And I'll go back and spend a few hours gathering that information, come back and tell them a number, and then the immediate next question is, how much of that is virtual machines? And you go, okay.
Oh, I only wrote the taxonomy at this level, sorry. I have to go write it again.
So this is the thing that solves that question, and I'll shout out to our friend Sean in the back who
spent a lot of time on this.
Managed this PR through the process and got it done on time for version 1.1.
And you'd think it's just naming conventions, it'll be easy. My goodness, there's a lot of opinions. So there's been a lot of time put into this, so give Sean a pat on the back for this one. Okay, and finally, this is my personal favorite one, because what we're talking about in Focus right now, and a lot of what you heard on main stage is all around, we want you to start using Focus, we want you to start adopting Focus. Think about how it will fit into your organization and into your critical processes. So I started personally trying to adopt Focus in version 1. I realized I actually couldn't, because there were certain bits of billing detail that broke my recharge process. And I'm going to say thanks to Irina, I don't think she's in the room, but she's on main stage tomorrow on our Focus Maintainers panel, who helped fix this for me in version 1.1 by adding in additional SKU data. So now we actually have specific areas where we can define not only the SKU price details, so they're kind of the qualitative and quantitative metrics of what is a SKU. So you can think of number of cores, gigabytes of memory, was it purchased on demand? It's kind of a little bit of a free-form space that allows the vendors to put in all the extra SKU-specific information that we don't have a specific Focus column for, but it makes it directly accessible so that you can then pull that out and still make it available and usable in your own internal processes. And then specifically, the other element is the SKU meter. So some of you may hear this as like kind of operation or event. It's effectively the chargeable unit that is being metered or measured that corresponds to your unit rate. So I think for the Azure folks, they'll be familiar with the kind of meter concept there. The terminology is different, but this is actually how we're trying to make sure that, for example, if I've got an object storage service that might have a separate SKU for API requests, data transfer, encryption, object management, etc., when I'm buying the parent service, I don't necessarily see that, but I need to understand, how much of that is data transfer. How much of that is encryption? How much of that is API requests? Because they all are individual components that form the things I'm being charged for, which is why we wanted to bring this up as kind of a first-class element to make it easier for kind of interrogating and understanding exactly what it is that we're paying for, effectively. Yeah. So,
Roadmap-wise, we just want to go through a little bit of the history of this. Jared did a bit of this morning. This whole effort started back in February of 2022. So a couple years ago already, a couple years and more ago, as a working group within the FinOps Foundation. We've gone through 4 releases so far. There was a .5 release that sort of introduced the initial low-hanging fruit, if you will, of consolidating CSP data together. There was a 1.0 preview release. There was a 1.0 release, which was released this past June at FinOps X, which feels like a year ago already. And today, the version 1.1 spec came out. So this is the spec release that has driven us to this point where we're feeling, again, in a FinOps manner of crawl, walk, run. Start off with the things that are easy, that you're able to do, that make a big impact initially, and then start to refine and define those things and add new features and new capabilities as you go.
Excellent. And so that's the bit where I feel like we're moving into the place where now Focus is ready to be adopted. It's ready for prime time. And I appreciate, with my personal story, version 1, with any version 1, we didn't quite get it 100% right. We're adding extra bits and pieces. And in version 1.2, it says likely on there, but I feel like based on what we've heard from the State of FinOps today and the feedback I've heard from people walking around, we need to start looking at how we incorporate in a more standardized way SaaS data sets and SaaS data feeds to broaden the scope of what we can capture and Focus. Yep. But that's based on the feedback we've heard so far. And one of the key things that as maintainers we're really focused on is making sure we understand what are the barriers for you being able to use Focus in your own environment. Obviously, we take as much community feedback as we can, and we've obviously got the Focus user group, which is helping drive more feedback. But as you're here, I really would encourage you to go over to the FinOps Focus Lab, take a look and tell us, would you be able to use this? Would it support the use cases that are important for your organization? If it doesn't, please tell us. We want to bring that in to 1.2 or 1.3 or any of the future specs and make sure we're getting rid of those adoption barriers. This is probably one of the most important things to us is Focus only succeeds if it helps solve the common use cases and the common problems for you guys. and for me personally as well, obviously. But
Obviously.
yeah. But that's how we're trying to make sure we prioritize what are the most important things that we do next. And I think it's great, Rob, that on the wall in the Focus Lab, you've got all of the potential kind of work items that we've got in scope for 1.2 and 1.3. We want you to get up there and vote on those. Tell us what you think is most important to you that's going to help you adopt Focus. And if there's something missing, please tell us that too.
Yep. Focus is really enabling a lot of the things, most of the things that JR was talking about this morning, right? It's giving us the information, better, more integrated information, faster, so that we can do the cost-aware product decisions that we want to do, so that we can build in more places than just in public cloud. We can gather that information together and start to make the trade-offs between, do I use SaaS or do I use public cloud? AI will present more challenges for the spec. It's an interesting area that we're trying to get into, of trying to figure out how we get that information into the structures that are in place for the spec right now, or are there new things that we need to explore there? I expect that'll be a big topic of a discussion and work over the next year as well. Sustainability is one of the topic areas for version 1.2 that's under consideration. So that might be something that you want to take a look at. How are you using sustainability data with your cost and usage data today? We would love to hear use cases that you're actually using to understand how we could either meet those or work towards meeting those in the future in an iterative way. And last, FinOps is everyone's job, right? This is the point of all of this work that we are doing, is to make this data available. And so if we can do that with clearer terminology, without having to spend 5 minutes explaining the difference between a management account and a project and an enrollment to an executive, and instead we can focus on the insight that we've gathered from doing our FinOps work. That's going to be a win for everybody, and something we want to really drive towards. So what we'd like you to do as you leave this room today, get involved. All of you have some role to play, some thing that you can do to support Focus and to support the Foundation's investment in Focus overall. If you're just curious about it, please come by the lab, take a look at things, take a sticker, take one of these cool Rubik's Cubes. If you jumble up the Rubik's Cube, it's like a cool metaphor for how your billing data looks today. King of the metaphors. Okay, stop by and learn a little bit more about it. The best thing you could do if you are not using Focus actively today, start looking at your Focus data, right? Only you can get your cloud data in the Focus format, and that sends an important signal to cloud providers, SaaS providers, anybody who's sending you billing data, that you're interested in this kind of a standard format, and you want to look at it, you want to use it, and you want them to continue to invest in it. Again, these vendors are spending a huge amount of their time and energy driving this forward. We want to really give them good feedback about that. If you want to use Focus in your practice, use those downloaded data sets and start to build queries on top of those. Start to integrate them into your pipelines and start to look at how those compare to things you're using now, and figure out how you can use those more effectively in your practice. We would like to have you involved in our Focus user group. You'll be able to join the Focus user group if you stop by, or go to the focus.finops.org website. Join the Focus user group and get involved weekly with people from around the world. There's a European and American time zone call. There's an APJ call, so no matter where you are in the world, somewhere each week you'll have the opportunity to talk Focus with a bunch of other people. And if you're really integrated and you want to make Focus better, consider joining the Focus project as a practitioner, as a contributor, and then you can have a direct hand in making this Focus spec better for everyone.
I think that would be the main thing I would love from everybody in the room is go, even if it's not in your production account, even if it's just in your labs, your sandbox account, go switch on a Focus export. Take a look at it. Think about how you might be able to use that to run one of your critical FinOps processes. If it doesn't work, then tell us. Tell us in the user group, tell us in the Focus project, because we want to know. We want to make this the universal standard for how we manage dynamic billing data from cloud providers, SaaS providers, and potentially on-premise and other scenarios in the future. But we can't do that without your help.
Okay.
Awesome.
So you've made the best decision of the conference by coming to our talk. But if you would like, to learn more about, dig in more about Focus,
well, they've
and
missed the first one, Rob.
Learn how some other people. Well, the best thing you could do would be to go back in time a couple hours and visit the Focus Adoption Chalk Talk, which I heard was excellent, by the way. I hope some of you were there. This talk is the second one there, but we will also be hearing from Verticent and United Health Group later on today. You'll be hearing from Heineken at the end of the day tomorrow, and more detail from the European Parliament Parliament, from Nevin and Julian, who'll be talking about how they've integrated this as a standard across the European Commission, Parliament, and Council. So lots of good information on how companies are actually using Focus today to get some value. You can learn from them. And then if you want to have no fun at all, Vass and Rob will talk Focus in the Studio 7 down here at the middle of the day tomorrow. That's a fun exercise where you'll actually get to write SQL queries. And who doesn't like to write SQL queries at 2:30 in the afternoon? So we welcome you there. On the last slide, just this is where the Focus Lab is. And if you're confused about where that is, you are here. Just go across the hall. It's literally right over there. We've got a few minutes to take questions, I think, if anyone was there. Thank you, Alex, for joining me today.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Cheers, buddy. Right, do we have a mic, or we just have everyone kind of shout out things?
got a mic right there.
Okay.
Go for it.
Having had the fun of doing some taxonomies myself in the past, is there any activity working with the big config management database providers, maybe ServiceNow, someone like that, to adopt a common taxonomy for all of those inventoried items?
Ooh, now that is interesting. I think when we've been, because we've got a variety of folks who've been contributing to this, and a lot of us grew up obviously in the on-premise environment as well. So I think when you look at the taxonomy, there is a certain kind of a natural kind of we know this needs to be comparable between on-premise and traditional taxonomies. We haven't picked a specific taxonomy to say we're going to try and align with this. I would say if you kind of want a little bit more detail around where this is going, the gentleman just behind you who wrote the taxonomy has probably got a good piece of vision on this. But the idea is the taxonomy should be universal enough that it should be able to effectively describe our on-prem and our cloud assets and potentially future services as well. It's kind of we're trying to walk the line between what is genuinely like a comparable service and what is kind of uniquely unique, which is something. It's an argument that I think we're going to revisit as we look at the taxonomy again as new providers come in.
I'll give you the Focus sales guy answer, which is we would love to have contributions like that coming into the project, right? The Focus, we didn't talk much about the structure of the project, but Focus is its own standard, open source standard project, specification project. So the Focus project owns the IP that is a part of this. The members donate their time and their energy and their ideas to the spec. And so that is something that is open to anyone who is willing to do that, to make that spec better. And so we would love to have anyone, if you're working with a vendor who you think would be a really beneficial member of this community and who could contribute that kind of thing, we would love to have them involved.
Yeah.
Another question right here in the front.
Perfect.
Thank you. I have one question. I pick up on your first slide where the tangent for the FinOps tool being a generator and a consumer both, right? There is an important piece of the puzzle that sits with the FinOps tooling, and that's the context. That's the metadata. Are there any discussions to standardize that? There are multiple tools across the industry. We all depend on tags and we understand how important they are. But then the moment you go to a tool, then that is turned, or the tags are turned into a contextual information, which sits with that tool and is not standardized.
Interesting, because I appreciate that you kind of, the way I think about this is these are the types of like downstream enrichments that are personal to your organization that make the billing data more real and more usable. I wouldn't say Focus has defined a way for how you should do this, but the spec is naturally extensible. So if you were to put in, let's say, I don't know, a business unit hierarchy, layer 1 to 5, and I would say that might be one of the first enrichments you do after picking up and consolidating your Focus data set, is then I'm going to run it through a transformation to say, right, this is how it matches up with my business organization hierarchy. That's absolutely okay, and that's still compliant. I don't know if we would necessarily say this is exactly how you should do it, because the idea is that this should be extensible to support your own use cases. But that is one that it often comes up. And whether you're using a third-party tool to do that, providing they are not changing the focus spec in a way that would kind of break the core element of what is defined in the specification, you are free to add additional columns that are designed to make it easy for you to personalize it to your organization's information. And I mean, I think the thing that is actually sometimes a little bit misunderstood is just because the specification hasn't necessarily defined an exact column, it doesn't mean that your billing generator, so your cloud service provider, is not able to add on additional custom columns that are specific for them. We're focused on making sure, the way we drive the focus specification is around how do we satisfy the key FinOps use cases that we want to solve for. And if it helps us solve a key FinOps use case, it ends up in the spec. And if it doesn't, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to add it on. I mean, we fully envisage there are going to be third-party tooling providers and also ourselves, as we incorporate it into our own internal data management systems, we're going to be adding additional columns and additional data along as we go.
Thanks, I hear that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The premise in my mind was that so far we have been talking about cloud data primarily, but with the introduction of scopes, we are essentially expanding the bit.
Yeah.
So my, and I'm not rat-holing on it, but then the thought is why not include these FinOps tool providers as one of the scopes to standardize? And that's a tangent.
That's interesting, actually.
All right, we have one more question here in the front, and then we are at time. But the good news is, like Rob said, the Focus Lab is literally right outside this door, and they will be here ready to answer your questions all day today and tomorrow. So we're going to have one more here in the front.
First of all, thank you for your talk. Very informative. I'm picking up on the point when you say that you're planning a release or a spec release every half year. So we are an AWS customer, and they are still on the 1.0 preview level with their custom usage report data exports. What about the CSP adoption of your fast pace?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's important to understand sort of how these two things go together, right? Because as Alex said, the spec is the spec. The spec is the shell, the schema with which we want to see cloud providers and SaaS providers and others produce the data so that it looks consistent and we can integrate it together. How an individual provider decides to do that is really up to them, and it's important especially because there are a couple things. We being part of the Linux Foundation are in a particularly advantageous role in trying to facilitate this kind of activity, right? Then bringing together the cloud providers, SaaS providers, platform vendors, and practitioners into a single room and getting them to work together on this kind of a project. But we also have to be very careful that we're not allowing them to, we're not creating either intentionally or unintentionally any sort of antitrust activity that would go on. So really the implementations of how those cloud providers do that, they respond best to you. They respond best to the customers who are saying to them, I want to see this data, I want to see this support, right? This is how cloud providers have always developed their services, and every company has developed their services in getting that from you. So we're happy to provide the structure that we want that data to appear in, and then really it's up to you all as a community to push that into the marketplace and get the information that you want from the vendors that you want to see it from.
I mean,
And
AWS
a big
have a
signal,
breakout room here,
big
don't they?
signal is downloading that data. Go to the website
Yes.
and download that data, and that tells that provider, hey, this is something we should invest in. And
You bet.
If you don't go to the Focus Lab after this, go up to the AWS room and say, hey, where's my Focus 1.1, okay? That'd be great. Appreciate that.
Okay.
thank you, guys. It's
Thanks,
hard to
everybody.
underestimate
Cheers.
just how awesome this is. Big round of applause for these guys and all the work that has been put in. Come outside and visit us in the Focus Lab. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X Europe content on our YouTube channel playlist. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for speakers to help our channel. We appreciate your support.